Hey everyone, welcome back to another live stream on a Wednesday night. Looking forward to getting stuck into some of the questions coming through. As always, having a great discussion with you here on the channel. So get those questions ready, chuck them in the chat. Got a few things to talk through first with one of the videos that I put up this week, and just wanted to give my thoughts if you haven't been able to go watch the video all about strength for endurance and my thoughts and philosophy around programming strength training in for endurance athletes. Just wanted to give you a few of my thoughts on that first and break down that video a little bit more depth. And then we can get stuck straight into the questions. Josh, great to see you again. Welcome back to another live. Looking forward to seeing if you've got any questions in there tonight. As always, say hello in the chat. Let me know that you're here. Super chat is on. If you do feel like you're getting any value out of these live streams, there is always an opportunity to make a small donation to keep this channel up and running. It helps me invest in new bits of equipment, the streaming software that I'm using at the moment, keep that subscription running. But main thing out of these is to get your questions answered and have a really good discussion about sports science and endurance overall. So looking forward to another one. We'll give it a little bit to get a few people in, and let's see how we go tonight. But as I got through in a video the other day, and hopefully you've seen it, talking about my philosophy around strength training for endurance athletes and the process that I go through in terms of simplifying it down so it works in with what we're doing. Because primarily as endurance athletes, we need to think about, and coaching endurance athletes, if you're a coach out there, we need to think about, well, what is the most important part of the training program? And that's going to be swimming, cycling, running, kayaking, whatever the sport is. That is the main part of why we train, is we want to be able to perform our sport. So making sure that is the emphasis and the focus. And then things like our work that we do in the gym and any strength and conditioning type work we do, or any strength work we do, squatting, deadlifting, whatever it may be, is then supplementary to that. It's complementing what we're doing, swim, bike, run, row, whatever your sport is. We're not trying to take away from it. So we need to be adding. And that's really, I guess, where everything starts here with my philosophy, is that we had some great questions come through last week asking, should I be targeting muscular endurance? Should I be targeting, or when should my strength sessions fit in? And really the way I go about it is, well, first and foremost is we're already doing a lot of muscular endurance when it comes to our sport anyway. That's all we're doing. When you're running, when you're cycling, you're taking step after step or turning the pedals hundreds of, or if not thousands, 10,000 times throughout each individual session. Multiply that across all the sessions in the week, across your entire training cycle. We're taking a lot of these contractions, sub-maximal contractions, again and again and again. And what is that essentially building? It's essentially building our muscular endurance. So by going into the gym and doing more of that and doing your sets of 15 or circuit-based training, maximum repetition for time, isn't necessarily bad, but is it giving us any complementary stimulus? Probably not. We could just be going out and doing another 20-minute run or a 40-minute run, and you get a more specific benefit, because then it becomes more about muscular endurance, but then also the side of things from a energy system development perspective as well. So that's really where I start with it. We need to be doing something that is going to be beneficial and add to what we're doing, and but then also not take away from everything. So I go through a really simple couple of phases, and as you would have seen in the video, I talked about the different components of our endurance programs. Typically, we have some sort of base phase, we have some sort of race specific or event specific preparation. Then we get stuck into our peak and taper, and I kind of align those with how I go about prescribing strength training for endurance. So in the base phase, when we're doing our aerobic work, building up our VO2, doing some VO2 intervals, some zone 2 running, whatever it might be, working on things like our movement competency. Can we squat in a really nice, effective pattern? Can we deadlift really well? Can we hinge? Can we do single leg and double leg type exercises? Get some basic upper body strength happening. Are we moving in the right way? Building some good quality motor learning patterns, and that nervous system connection is a really critical part. As addition to that, we build some basic foundational strength. So what are the key movements? Lower body push, so something like a squat or a split squat, lunge, etc. Lower body pull, your deadlift variations. Upper body push is some sort of, I guess you can think about push up or bench press. Upper body pull is like a pull up, or bench pull, rows, anything like that. And then really an ability to transfer those forces up from the lower body to the upper body, and vice versa. So effectively working on your core and the connection more than anything between lower and upper body, and being able to transfer those forces is obviously critical for things like swimming, where you're catching with your upper body and transferring and driving off your hip. Those are the main things we're then getting done. We're just building some foundational strength. Can we just get stronger in those movements? And that doesn't necessarily require things like like 15 repetitions in a set or doing maximum reps. It's all about the quality over quantity. It's kind of like what we do with our high intensity interval training or with our VO2 max interval training, we're all about quality rather than the amount we're doing. So we try to lift up, ideally, when you've sort of built up a little bit of base, as with anything, build your movement competencies first, make sure you're safe doing those movements so you're not going to injure yourself. Again, making that complementary aspect to what we're doing from an endurance perspective. But then working in a little bit of strength where we're looking at maybe rep ranges of anywhere between sort of 2 to 3 sets of like 4 to 8, starting to lift up the amount of weight that we're lifting in some of those movements and just get us strong, have good quality rest, 2 to 3 minutes rest, and then go again in the set. Is a really good way of doing it. Build a bit of volume up there. We just want to be able to produce a little bit more force and be able to output more. Doesn't need to be putting us in a position where we're gaining any hypertrophy either. I've already done a video on this talking about the crossover or the interference between the high amount of endurance and the strength training. It's almost impossible if you're doing enough endurance and focusing most of your time there, which we should be as endurance athletes. It's almost impossible to start putting on size as a result of the gym, and it's difficult to get that hypertrophy going. But what we're doing is we're making the most of the muscle size that we've got. You might gain a little bit here and there at a very base level, but we're trying to make the most of the muscle mass that we've got, be able to output as much force as we can. Then as we start getting into that race-specific period, when we're talking about changing our endurance training, we change the gym to be a little bit more focused on can we output a little bit better in terms of things like our power output. Can we transition just being strong into being a little bit explosive if you're a runner, that explosive or that sort of pushing off the ground type stimulus when we're looking about a bit more plyometric from a running perspective, being able to push more power through the bike, increase your cadence, maybe looking at the force production side of things. Can we produce more force at the same rate? That's really what we're looking at here from a power perspective. What is our output now? And how does that relate more to a performance-specific outcome for us? Building on that basic strength that we've developed. And it's similar to, again, what we talk about from base phase heading into a race specific. We have our base phase, we build general qualities, our overall engine, then we get into our race specific phase, which is tuning up the engine. So we're trying to just work on, can we prepare everything, can we insert the cylinders in the engine and get it firing ready for our event day? All of these things are basically what we're doing in the gym as well. We get to our peak and taper, and it's all about, again, peaking and tapering. Can we just tune everything up? Maybe work a little bit further towards that plyometric end of the spectrum. Not always. We go a bit individual once we get to this point, but it's all about just trying to freshen you up anyway. So really, those are the processes I follow when we start talking about strength and incorporating gym sessions into endurance. Because it makes sense. It fits in, it matches what we're trying to achieve from an endurance perspective. So the program's not trying to do too much at once. We're kind of following a very similar pattern, but we're also making it really, really effective and avoiding any of that crossover fatigue that a lot of people sort of talk about, where it's the fatigue starts to onset as a result of, well, I've pushed too hard in the gym and didn't get myself enough recoveries, or I've just gone and done more muscular endurance to the gym, so I go out and I'm sore for my run, my ride, whatever it may be. We're trying to avoid some of that, trying to make it complementary or support our endurance program as much as possible. So if you want that full breakdown, go have a look at that video. We came up, put it up the other day. A really good one to just give you some basics on how I go about my philosophy around strength training. And also go check out ages ago. If you scroll back through the channel, one of the original videos I put up was talking about that, basically the physiology behind how endurance athletes can't put on size. If you're doing a significant amount of Ks in the week, regardless if you're a swimmer, cyclist, runner, rower, whatever, if your major focus of 80% of your program, for example, is endurance based and doing your sport, and the other 20 was gym and strength and mobility, things like that, it's very difficult to put on size unless you kind of flip things in the other direction, because physiologically we get inhibition. Some of the physiology just doesn't allow it to occur. So there are plenty of bonuses to be able to doing strength, and if you do it smart, you're not going to put on the size that you might be fearful of, and that sort of myth is kind of knocked out. But then also we start to get in some really good performance benefit, injury prevention, all of that is that good positive byproduct as a result of getting stuck into some of the strength stuff. So hope that gives you a bit of an insight. I know we've got a few more in here now. Get those questions coming through. We got one already in the chat, so I'm going to get to it in a second. But before I do, please consider hitting that share button down below. You'll see it if I get my hands right here. It's going to be on this side, just down below here. Click the share button. If you're on a computer, if you're on your phone, it'll be in a little different spot. Share this link with someone that might be interested in asking a question, or if you know someone who might be interested in joining the discussion, share it now. I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. And as always, if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel. Had some great discussions on Instagram as well recently after I put that call out last week, where people have been sending their Instagram questions through. Don't have any specific ones to go through tonight that people want to ask on the live stream, but have had some good discussions happening on Instagram as well. So go check that one out. All the links to everything should be down in the description to go check it out as well. So without any further ado, let's get stuck into our first question of this evening. I'll bring it up on the screen here. Hopefully that's a not too bad one to see. It's gone black tonight in the background, which is usually a little bit interesting. I'll see if I can quickly change this, because normally it goes white and it's a little bit easier to see. I might have changed my settings. There we go. That's a little bit easier to read for us now. First question coming through. I'm suffering hard DOMS, so delayed onset muscle soreness, for those of you a bit unfamiliar with DOMS. After my first track session and from downhill mountain running, could I do some easy running or cycling, or would you recommend something else? Follow up to that, I'm so sore I struggle walking. Unfortunate to hear that you're sort of struggling to walk after some of those sessions, and it's never a fun feeling. We've all experienced DOMS at some point, and really all DOMS are just a combination of a bit of muscle damage and a little bit of that sort of, I guess, byproduct accumulation, lactic acid, if you like. So really a really good way to deal with DOMS is do things that make you feel better as a primary function. A lot of it can come down to the psychological component. That's why when we talked about recovery methods before, so much of it comes down to, if it makes you feel like you're recovering better, it's probably worthwhile. Go and do it. So when we are looking at something like DOMS, we obviously just need to go, like, the more you can just rest and recover, the better, essentially, because any further training. So if you go out and do, like, if you're describing an easy run as like a zone 2 run, for example, you're still aerobic, you might be pushing yourself a little bit there, not super hard, but you're still working. And same for cycling. You might be just sort of, I guess, negating any recovery effect. If you're talking really, really low level, if you're a runner, I'd probably suggest the bike, just to deload the impact off the legs, is going to be a beneficial one for you to help reduce those DOMS. Get the legs moving, get the blood flowing, muscles sort of contracting and relaxing. It's going to help to pump the blood around the system a bit better, flush out any of those byproducts and lactic acid accumulation that's sitting in the legs particularly. We're obviously going to get a lot of accumulation down the lower body because we're standing upright. When you run, gravity pushes everything down, so blood flow actually has to work against gravity to get back up to the heart. So some cycling is going to help with that process. You might even find something I like doing after hard sessions or game day or events. I did it yesterday after my run, actually, my interval session. Jumped down on the ground and chucked my legs up a wall. So it does look a little bit silly, but what you're doing is you're inverting your body. So you actually see a lot of footballers start to do it at half time. You might see cricketers do it after a long period of time as well. If you lie on the ground and put your legs up a wall, gravity's now pushing that blood back down to your heart. So it's actually assisting that process without you having to continue to move. You might find that as a little bit of a good strategy immediately after you run to start that process of reducing a bit of the DOMS, clear some of that out for a little bit. You only have to do short periods, maybe do like a minute or so with your legs up a wall, stand up again, have a bit of walk around, do another minute or so. I've sort of built up to an ability of being able to do a couple of minutes at a time before I stand up. So progress it. But doing that can be really beneficial, and you can do it later as well. It doesn't take any extra time. It's just a bit awkward when you have to find a wall to sit down and chuck your legs up, and it makes it difficult to get your fuel and nutrition and hydration back in. But again, short periods is really useful, and just be mindful when you stand back up. You might feel a little bit dizzy if you get up too quick. That can be a good one. Things like foam rolling, if you've got foam rolling, recovery boots, the massage guns. I don't have it here. It's actually in the other room. The massage gun I've been using for the last little while. I've been finding really good just after the run, just to give me a little bit of that sort of, just get some blood flow happening to some of the areas where I feel a little bit sore. Again, promoting blood flow. And if it is going to promote that feeling of you feel a bit better, then we can start to think about, all right, is it going to be an effective method long term? Probably, because if you feel like it's working, that probably is. From a DOMS perspective and like reducing the sensation of pain, cold water therapy or ice baths are really good at that. Where I tend to direct away from them, though, is they're really good for short term and when we got short term turnarounds. So if you're doing a run in the morning and you need to back up in the afternoon and you're trying to deal with the DOMS, get in the cold water is going to be useful. Sort of try to get as cool as you possibly can. If you can head to a beach, or if you fill up a bathtub, a rubbish bin, whatever it might be, try to get as cool as possible. You want it sort of like lower than about 13-ish degrees. So 10 to 13 degrees, I think off the top of my head. I'm probably slightly out there, but gives you a guide. We want it quite cool, and that's going to help reduce that sensation of, I guess, pain associated with DOMS too. But the downside is it inhibits some of our longer term chronic adaptations. And that's why I say it's probably only worthwhile if you're doing a double session in the day rather than, and you're doing like a run in the morning and then another run in the afternoon. That's probably the best time. Or if you're racing twice in the day as well, you're doing a multi-stage event, things like that, ice baths in between can be useful. When we're talking about doing one session in the day, I probably would try some of these other methods first. And really anything that gives you a bit of relief from the pain and the DOMS is going to be good. Continuing to move obviously is a good strategy, like I said. But some of these other methods, I find personally that anything where I've got some physical touch to it. So things like the recovery boots where I'm getting compression and something feels like it's pushing on me. The massage gun's a good one. Foam roller. I like the legs up the wall because I can kind of feel like or put myself in a mindset where I feel like the blood's rushing back to my heart. Compression socks, compression tights, all of these things for me, when I personally get that feeling of something being in contact with me, I feel like the pain level reduces quite quickly and the DOMs start to go away a little bit quicker. I might still be fatigued and tired, so I can't go out and just run straight away and be high performing immediately, but it definitely helps that the I guess perception of delayed onset muscle soreness, or at least the perception of pain anyway. So might be something to think about too. So hopefully that gives you a few ideas around that. There really is a number of different ways you can go. You kind of almost have to find what works for you. That's a lot of what recovery tends to be most of the time. Other than our nutrition, hydration, and sleep, it's all about the little 1%ers that might put us in a better mindset or psychology, if you like, to get us to recover better. So again, hopefully that answers that question, but great one because a lot of athletes suffer with the DOMS side of things, particularly after hard sessions. And obviously the downhill running is going to give you a lot of impact too. So no surprises that you're feeling a little bit sore after that. Moving into our next one, Michael, thanks for jumping in and dropping your question in here. Your question up here we've got is, how would I go with maintaining weight during my first Ironman training? I often drop 45 kilos during marathon training. 425, sorry, is what we've got here in the follow-up. 425 kilos during marathon training, but would prefer to stay a similar weight. And I'm going to show the proof of that 4 to 5 because dropping 45 would be huge. In terms of, I'll tick off the basics of the weight management side of things first, and then we can get into some of the other components of why you might be dropping down. Really, the weight management side of things basically works off a 3-position scale, or what I call a 3-position scale. We have, if you aren't increasing or decreasing your mass or weight overall, so you jump on the scales and you're exactly the same all the time, we take out all the factors of you've built more muscle mass and you've dropped fat mass, all those things. If you stay the same weight and you, over a period of time, what you're doing is your output is equaled by your input. So any training, you add up all the activity and all the calories or kilojoules, whatever you want to measure it in, you add up all that energy output, including your resting output. So we call your resting metabolic rate or your basal metabolic rate, which is effectively just enough energy to use for you to sustain life. So when you're sleeping, you're doing nothing but just lying there. Thermogenic effect of food, which is your burning of fuel to be able to bring fuel back into the body. You add up all of those outputs, and if you're equaling that exactly with your inputs or very close to, so whatever food you're eating is in terms of how many calories or kilojoules you're getting in equals what you're burning, we're going to stay at the same weight. When your output is more than your input, we're in what's called a calorie deficit. So you're burning more than what you're taking in and you can start dropping weight. When your output is less than what your input is, you're going to start gaining weight because we're in surplus. We're getting more fuel or more energy into the body than what we actually are burning. So based on that, in your scenario here, where it's you often drop 4 to 5 kilos, I'm going to put that as you keeping your nutrition the same. And correct me if I'm wrong here and let me know in the chat, but you're keeping your nutrition the same, but you're just increasing the volume of your training, which is very, very common. And so, of course, we now tip ourselves in that deficit, don't we? We have more energy expenditure across the week than what our fuel is coming in, which means we're going to be starting to reduce a bit of body weight. So being able to stay on top of that and make sure you're getting enough fuel in, it can be difficult to get that balance because sometimes when you lift that volume significantly, you might sometimes feel like you're eating way too much. Doing some basic tracking of it, I think, is the best way to go about it. Working out what are each of my meals roughly going to be in terms of kilojoules or calories, however you measure it. Looking at some of your data from your training. I know like things like Garmin, Apple Watch, Fitbit, all of these devices that we have do an okay job. They're never going to be perfect. No device will be. In any aspect, GPS, heart rate, anything like that, they're never going to be perfect, but they do a reasonable job at estimating your energy expenditure. So have a look at some of those metrics. How much energy did you burn? And then try to map out, all right, across the day, here's what all my training added up to. What do I now, or across my training week, what do I have to input back in? And then work out strategies of what you might need to do. I mean, the classic example, and I actually spoke to an athlete via email the other week talking about this, was the classic example is Michael Phelps. Back in the day, you would hear crazy stories about this massive diet that he had to go through to be able to maintain body weight, because his energy expenditure was huge. Heaps of high intensity training, 2-3 swims a day, and then you have gym sessions in and amongst that. Obviously at a very different level to what most of us are at in terms of performance, because he was he's arguably the best swimmer ever. But it's the type of thing that he had to put a significant amount of fuel back into his body to match that, so he didn't drop down in body weight, because that's where it was starting to be detrimental to him. And you might actually notice that you drop significant amounts. 5 kilos is a significant amount of body weight to lose, and you might actually feel like you're underperforming a bit because you're just down on what you're used to. You may lose a little bit of power. You may also lose a little bit of capacity to be able to carry fuel in terms of how much storage or stored fuel you have in your system. All of these little factors can start to work against you a bit. You drop down too light, and that starts to put us in a position where general health and well-being is starting to be impacted a little bit. Why? Because we're at a weight where it's just maybe not as sustainable. We lost a little bit of that layer of fat that we actually need to sustain a healthy weight for you. Everyone's slightly different in terms of their genetics around that side of things, and that's a critical one to consider. Dropping a little bit of body weight, like if you're dropping 1 or 2 and even 4 to 5 kilos, isn't uncommon for a lot of athletes. We see it quite a lot with athletes when they lead into competition, because they just naturally fall in that calorie deficit of increased training load and volume, but maintain their fuel intake. And dropping a bit of body weight can actually be helpful for things like running, because obviously less mass, power to weight ratio goes up. So things like our relative VO2 increase, our economy might increase as well. But as long as we're as long as we're still within that range where we're not feeling like it's a detriment to our performance, and if you're finding that staying at a similar weight is actually going to be better for you, particularly for something like Ironman, like marathon, if you're talking about you get down, Ironman's going to be exaggerated again, because we've got all the extras of swim and bike training in there compared to just the marathon. Getting that fuel back in to balance out what you're expending and losing is going to be super, super important. So that's something I'd employ to look at. You can just do it at a very basic level. It doesn't have to be fancy at all in terms of how you're tracking calories or anything like that. It's a reasonable guide, though, will be calculate what you're inputting, have a look at some of your training data and what you're outputting, add a little bit on as a bit of a leeway, and sort of just monitor that body weight and see how you're going. If you feel like you're still dropping down, or if you're only dropping down 1 to 2 kilos instead of 4 to 5, you might find that that's okay. Just as long as you're probably not going the other way. We probably don't want to be putting on too much size in terms of going the other direction and eating too much, but you'll notice that it's very difficult for most endurance athletes to almost eat too much because you are doing a significant amount of work as well. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit there. I just seen your follow-up come through. Usually quite lean year round, but never track nutrition too much. Just tried to eat more on long days. If I calorie count, would you recommend I count macros as well? It's not something, like I said, it's not something I necessarily would look into. You don't really need to have to look into it too much. I mean, if you really want to, you can be very specific on the counting side of things and go, all right, exactly what am I taking in every meal, and be very pedantic about it. I personally, and maybe that's something you want to consult with a nutritionist or a dietitian about to refine that. I would probably, from my perspective, and this is just a bit of, I guess, recommendation here, is keep it quite simple. If you can identify where you need to have that extra fuel coming in, you can probably manage it pretty well without necessarily having to count it too much. And it might be just a case of, and I go through periods of this as well, where I feel like, all right, my training volume's lifted up. It might actually take a week or so for me to notice that I probably need to be taking in a bit more fuel. When that then happens, I start planning out, all right, instead of trying to just load up on my main meals of the day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and just have a bit more, I might have a little bit more at each of those, but then I'll be more conscious of, all right, I need to have something when I have my coffee in the morning, I need to have maybe some toast with it, or maybe a banana with it, to try and just boost up a little bit there. Maybe I need to have 2 little snacks in the afternoon because I've got a training session later on in the day. just adding those little bits on. They're usually the things when guys are trying to be a bit more conscious about dropping weight. In your circumstance, we're looking at maintaining, so it's probably more to get more fuel into the body than what you need, or you feel like you've got. When guys are talking about trying to drop weight, we're trying to cut out some of these little snack opportunities. Maybe for you, it's just going the other way and adding some of those little ones in throughout the day, and just boosting yourself up. If you feel like you're getting hungry when training volume goes up, that's probably the clear sign that you just need to be eating more. And you could almost leave it at that. You don't necessarily have to look into it too in depth to then understand, all right, we've got a bit of work to do here. So hopefully that balances out. If you are looking at things like macros and that side of things and counting calories, I'd get in contact with a sports dietitian or nutritionist. Probably sports dietitian is probably the better way to go, because they're a little bit more, I guess, clinically trained in understanding the entire picture in terms of our whole diet, rather than nutritionists, I find, and this is personal opinion, can sometimes go down their own little paths and what they sort of think and their methodologies on different types of diets. Whereas a dietitian is a bit more holistic and like, what do you need? And more sort of just straight to the point factual. So it can be a bit difficult to find the right practitioner for you, but I'd probably go down that direction if you're looking at if you want to nail it to the exact numbers, go down that path, because they're going to be able to provide the best information of what fuel is going to help you get back in and sort of work off that equation to help you balance out what you're inputting. All right, in terms of our next question, got another one here leading off the back of our nutrition. So a bit of a theme tonight, some nutrition questions, which is good. It's not something I guess advocate I'm massive on, but I always like having a conversation, because it is one of our key parts of endurance in particular, is understanding some of the nutrition and the fueling behind our performances, particularly when we're out there for so long. Fuel depletion and our fuel use is obviously critical to what we can output. So got a great question here now. Thanks for getting back to your last question. No worries. Hopefully it was a nice, clear answer. Got the swim this weekend. Oh yes, marathon swim. All the best for that one on the weekend. Hopefully you go really well. Looking forward to hear your race result. What carb sources would you recommend preloading with? We basically have, really simply, keeping it as super simple as possible, as we all know on this channel. It's something I love to do. Low GI is the best. So things that are slow releasing or slow burning, your grains, your cereals, your things like your pastas and all that are obviously the keys. Being mindful, and I mentioned in my email response, or my message response to you, be mindful of how much fluid intake you're going to be taking on as well. Start that loading process probably 2 days before is probably more than enough. The day before is probably the key one. 2 days before is just to begin that process, so you're not going, oh, all of a sudden I'm just eating a massive amount and then you're feeling really bloated. We just want to progress it just a bit. But it's all about your low GI, slow releasing carbohydrates. We want to try and avoid some of those faster ones. So the classic case of faster are just like your sports drink, so like your Gatorade type or whatever brand you use, your gels, lollies, anything that is just quick, rapid fire, because that's going to spike up your uptake of or want to use glucose. And that's why we still stay away from gels immediately before. So like before you get in the swim, avoid taking a gel immediately before you get in, because that's going to increase your body's want to burn those carbohydrates right now. Whereas if you have something more like a banana, it's going to be a little bit slower releasing than something like a gel. There's a scale of things. You just jump on Google and look at what's slow releasing or a low GI carbohydrate, and what's a high GI carbohydrate, and what are some examples of those. Really easy way to then understand, all right, what are the types of things I need to eat. If we go through some basics, things like at breakfast, having some protein in there is going to be useful as well. Help with any repair to get you best prepared for the event. If we're talking about breakfast, things like cereals or porridge, things like that. If you're going to have like eggs and things like that as well, again, the protein is going to be useful for that last minute repair. And working into the race. It's also going to help with a bit of that carbohydrate uptake too. Lunch, you can basically just follow some of those similar principles again, and what you might have with dinner in terms of pastas and rice and all of those good things that give us that slow release. But then also, like I said, be mindful of the fact that the more carbs you get in, the more fluid and water you're going to have to take in as well, and it's going to retain. So try to get that balance right. There isn't, I guess, a right or wrong. It's just mainly following try to get as many low, slow releasing carbs, because they're what's going to be stored. That's what the body's going to take in and go, okay, I'll save that for later, rather than the quick stuff, like your really high sugary stuff, when I call it sugary stuff. Like I said before, your gels, your sports drinks, your lollies, ice cream, all that type of stuff that have got carbs in them. they're going to burn up super, super quick. We want to try and stay away from those until we're already into the race. Like if you get partway through the swim and you're able to take a gel, I don't know what your circumstances are exactly with that, but that's where you'd start to take them, obviously, because we're just trying to get things in the body quickly. But beforehand, you want all the slower releasing stuff as possible. That's going to delay when we start to burn them later on, and help get you through overnight as well in the recovery process and the sleep process before we get into the race. So hopefully that answers that one a bit. I know it's probably a little bit vague, but again, keeping it quite simple. That's all we really need to be focusing on, and you're going to come out a winner majority of the time working off that strategy. Really great to see some other questions coming through. I'm going to get to those in a moment, but great to also see we've got 10 watching now, and I think the record for number of people in the stream at one time, I think, was 12 a couple of weeks ago. So as I said earlier, if you've just joined us, there's a little share button down here. If you're on your laptop, or if you're on your phone, it'll be in a slightly different spot. Share this link with someone else you might think is interested in joining this discussion. We've had some great questions already. The full replays will be going up afterwards as well. So if you have missed part of it, you can watch it later. Hit the share button, get some more in here. Let's try and break that personal record, or the channel record of having 12 in the live stream. We're 2 away. So if all of you got one person to join the stream, we'd be absolutely smashing our previous records. So I really appreciate if you do hit that share button. It's as simple as clicking share, or you can go up the top and just copy and paste the link if you're on your laptop or your computer. Chuck it in a text message, chuck it in your iMessage, in Messenger, Instagram, wherever. Share the link with someone. Let's get as many people in here as we can and try and get a new record tonight for a stream, which would be awesome. And I really appreciate you all jumping on and joining the conversation. Let's get stuck into our next question though. Do you use coffee (caffeine) as a performance enhancer? Yes, I do. I think every endurance athlete has done it at some point. If you do any cycling, it's kind of ingrained in the sport that you're on the caffeine side of things. I've read quite a lot of positive effects, typically in lower perceived effort at the same pace intensity. In terms of caffeine as a performance enhancer, there had traditionally been some, just working off the nutrition and the carbohydrate side we were just talking about, there has been some little bits of information here and there asking about or thinking about, is there a glycogen sparing effect by using caffeine? I don't think there's too much to look into there. Pretty sort of minimal effective. If you're having caffeine, it's going to delay the amount of carbohydrates we burn. Can't spit out my words. But in terms of the major effects of caffeine, we're mainly looking at decreasing the perception of effort. So reducing RPE. So we're running along the same pace, back end of an Ironman. You're cruising along zone 2 intensity. Instead of it feeling like a 3 out of 10, you're already a bit fatigued. So it probably starts to feel like a 5 out of 10. Having a bit of caffeine is going to reduce that sensation, increases a bit of alertness in our concentration as well, which is key at the back end of those races. That's also why you'll see on Ironman courses, they'll offer electrolyte, sports drink, water, and things like Red Bull is something that they have on a lot of courses, or flat Coke is a big favorite of mine. I'm not a big Red Bull fan, but flat Coke at the end of a 70.3 end of last year was unbelievably good. I don't drink a lot of it, but when you get a big hit of sugar and a big hit of caffeine and you're already fatigued, it does help kick things along. So in terms of that side of things, the major things we're looking at are, from a caffeine perspective, are increasing that mental alertness and the concentration side and ultimately the concentration side of things. Reduction of perceived effort is obviously a good one. If we feel like we're going a little bit easier at the same intensity, we're going to be coming out on top majority of the time. So really, it's the type of thing that there's going to be some small effects, predominantly psychological, but if it is going to have an effect and give us that little bit of a push and a little bit of a bonus, we're going to be coming out a big win. And that's why a lot of athletes will have it at the back end of their races, the long endurance type races where we just need to keep going. The mental side of things by then is critical. If you can stay alert and aware and sort of drop that perceived effort, you're going to be able to push yourself harder and a little bit faster for a little bit longer. And that's going to ultimately lead to the race result. In terms of training side of things and just day to day, I think something that we have to keep in mind with caffeine, and great that I actually remembered this and thought of this to share with you, is think about your daily intake of caffeine and what that looks like. There has been a bit of research to show that when we get into a race, if you've got really high caffeine intake day to day, so you're having a couple of coffees a day, you're having energy drinks or Red Bull, whatever, when you get into the race, having a little bit of caffeine isn't going to do massive amounts. because you're kind of immune to it. It's kind of like it's almost like addiction with drugs. The more you have in your system chronically, the more it takes for you to then get the effects or the benefits. So if you get addicted, like painkillers, for example, you then need more to actually feel that pain relief, because the body kind of just goes, that didn't do anything. I need more. Same thing with caffeine. You have caffeine at the beginning. You have caffeine like twice a day, 3 times a day, every day. You get into your race and try and take some. It's not going to do much for you. I've in the past tried to go off caffeine for periods of time. Might have a full day without having a coffee. It is a bit of a struggle at times, but if I combat that with really good sleep and really good nutrition, hydration, I'm going to be able to get through. And reducing that reliance day to day on it then allows you in a performance setting, it just goes bananas. I remember sort of like that 70.3 from last year, I was taking flat Coke at the end. Why did it have such a good effect was, one, because I struggled to take gels on the run anyway, and I wasn't getting many carbs in, so the sugar was helping me big time. But the caffeine at the back end hit me real quick, because I hadn't really had I wasn't having regular coffees in the sort of 2 months leading up. As the weather starts to warm up, I tend to go away from warmer beverages. That's a natural thing to do. But I was deliberately not having as many coffees, because I wanted to just make sure that any caffeine effect I was going to have at the end of my race was actually going to work. So it's the type of thing that you want to be careful about, that routine intake and daily intake, to make sure that on race day it makes as much of a difference as it possibly can, rather than you get to race day and you're just taking maybe a caffeine tablet, or you're taking Coke, or you're taking Red Bull just for the sake of it, and all then you're getting is the carbohydrate, which is okay. You're getting the sugar benefit out of it, but you're not getting the caffeine effect. It's like, well, what's the point of taking it? Just have another gel, or have another cup of sports drink or electrolyte, or something else. So I think that's really critical. So keep that in mind when we are talking about caffeine. Definitely something to consider. Before I get into the next question, talking about keto, Caleb just shared the link to his Facebook page. Good vibes, he says as well. Absolutely good vibes. Thanks for sharing that one across. We're at 11. We're super, super close. So if we can get 2 more, we break the record of most in the stream at a single time. I know it's not a lot of people, but the channel and the community here is growing really well, and I really appreciate you all jumping on, as I said before. Jumping into our next question, Ariel here. Welcome. I don't think I've seen you in the chat before, so welcome to the live stream if you are joining us for the first time, and appreciate you jumping in and joining the discussion. But keto diet and endurance sports, any update? Not entirely sure where you're at in terms of your understanding of keto and things like that, but I have covered it a little bit more so in the low carb versus high carb on the channel before. I did a video comparing the two. In terms of keto, this is a really interesting topic, because we hear it a lot. Like, there's some athletes that are on a heavy keto diet. What we have to consider, first and foremost, is true keto is very, very, very low restriction on carbohydrates. You need to be very careful in monitoring what we call your ketones, basically taking a blood sample to monitor the ketone level in your system, because it can get quite dangerous if you're mismanaging it. Majority of amateur athletes who talk about keto, and even professional athletes who talk about being keto, aren't actually full keto. They're just low carbohydrate. So the distinction is quite low. A previous colleague of mine went back from days when I used to be working as a swim teacher through my undergraduate degree. One of my colleagues there, who was also a swim teacher, who went on to become a dietitian at a hospital, we had this conversation about, well, how low do you actually have to be on carbohydrates to be considered keto? And typically she would be putting clients into a hospital to manage their keto or the period of keto, mainly doing it for clinical purposes, not necessarily performance. But that's how low and sort of, I guess, significant the change has to be purely keto. If we're talking what are the effects, and then talking low carb as well, because I think low carb is probably the more interesting one, because that's the more realistic, practical one that you can go and do. Most people will be able to stick to that a little bit better and actually follow that to its true definition. Low carb, for the most part, has some good intentions in terms of being able to improve your fat oxidation throughout activity. So obviously that's going to delay the onset of hitting the wall, because we're not burning through our carbohydrates as quickly. I get all that. At low intensities, it's good. So going out and doing your ultra distance marathon, that's where we're really seeing the benefit, because we're working at very, very low intensities, low zone 2. We're just looking at an all day pace. We're going to be burning as much fat as possible, because the intensity allows that. As intensity goes up, we need fuel more quickly. That makes sense. We have to produce faster contractions, so we need more fuel. We need fuel to be burning more rapidly, and that's where low carb doesn't really stack up. You need carbohydrates for the high intensity endurance. And what we call high intensity endurance is if you're a cyclist or like if you're a road racer and there's surges in the race, any type of performance where you want to be working, like when I say reasonable high intensity, if you're working anything basically 70%, 65 to 70% of your VO2 max and above, carbohydrates are your friend. So really, for pretty much every athlete out there, that's going to be marathon and below from a running perspective. That's going to be pretty much any triathlon, maybe as well Ironman, depending on how quickly you're going. Maybe not. That's kind of a borderline one. Those types of events, we're really talking about carbs are going to be anything less than that. Carbs are going to be king. Any of those big long ones, 100-mile endurance, maybe Ironman, depending on how quickly you're racing and what intensity you're racing at compared to your total engine. There is some research to show that, the extra fat oxidation is going to be quite useful. There's also some theories around periodized carbohydrate, which I'm more interested in terms of can we go low carb for the majority of the time, because there are some good health benefits to it as well. We get some of those benefits from just a general health and well-being. Then when we need the carbs, we start to bring them back in as we need them, or we fuel up on certain days. I think we mentioned in the chat before about fueling up in terms of building up to we set it for the particular event that we're talking about, but fueling up on particular days. I know I've got a high intensity session tomorrow, for example, so I'm going to have some more carbs today to get me prepared for that, or I'm going to have more carbs in the morning to prepare for the afternoon. I'm going to have a really low intensity session on Saturday, so maybe I'm going to have less carbs in the lead up and try to tap in a bit more to that low carb. There's some good research coming out, particularly of some of the studies that they're doing at the AIS. Louise Burke, if you look at any of her research, I think hers is probably the best in this space. A lot of people disagree with her because she's a little bit not anti-low carb and anti-keto, but she's sort of proven that you can get the benefits in terms of increasing your fat oxidation and all of that. But if you want to be winning some of these races and working at high intensity, because when we think of high intensity, we often think of like 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off, but it's not quite. When we talk about racing, ultimately endurance racing is who can get to the finish line the fastest for the most part, is majority of how races are structured. And you need to be working at the highest possible intensity compared to everyone else for the longest period of time to be able to do that. We need carbohydrates to do that. And any type of race, like a road race where there's intermittent efforts throughout, we see these ups and downs, team sports, all of that, carbohydrates is going to be critical. When we're sitting on one pace the entire time, very, very low, like I said, less than 70% of VO2 max, that's fine. That's more of a space where fat oxidation is going to be at its maximum, so we want to make the most of that capacity. When we talk about anything above that, so 65, 70%, we need carbs. That's as simple as it is. Because when we stop using carbs, or we're not necessarily using carbs as a primary fuel source, we're more relying on the fat oxidation. What happens is oxygen consumption goes up and it actually reduces our economy. So you kind of basically, from an oxygen consumption perspective, you're working harder than what you need to be able to produce the output. It's like running at, let's say, for example, you're running at 4-minute K pace, and normally you would have a VO2, so an oxygen consumption of 55 mils per kilo per minute. Being better at using fat is going to get you up to 60 mils per kilo per minute, but you're doing the same amount, like you're running at the same speed. So does that really actually make any difference to performance? Maybe, maybe not. Yes, you're probably not producing as much lactic acid, but for the most part, at those sub-maximal intensities, you're not going to be producing much anyway, so it's minimal. And depending on your training, you can train that ability to be better at shuttling it out and clearing it, tolerating it, all of these things as well. So I wouldn't really, they're probably sort of my thoughts. I'm not going to go, I guess, too much further because I could probably ramble and rant on it all day. But the keys are periodized carb is starting to appear as a reasonable strategy. Low carb is good generally overall, but you're going to need carbs if you want to go fast. Keep it to 3 simple points there. If that sort of sums up and answers your question, please leave a comment in the chat if you want me to go in any particular direction on that discussion, because it is such a broad topic. But yeah, I guess to answer your initial question, any updates, probably isn't anything really new coming out at the moment in that space. I haven't seen anything too like groundbreaking or I guess making a lot of news in recent times anyway. A lot of stuff's kind of been covered. It's the type of thing, it just has its resurgences like anything every couple of months or every couple of years or so. So I'll be interested to see what the next thing is. The ketone ester things from last year's Tour de France, the whole Alaphilippe thing where he was dropping back to get some supplement. That's kind of an interesting emerging area, but I don't know enough, and I don't think the research even knows too much on really where that's actually heading and if it's going to be worthwhile. Quite an expensive practice to get into as well. So hopefully that answers the question. I've just taken notice up on the screen here. I can see 13 watching now, so we have broken the stream record. See if we can keep going. Can we get it to 15? Can we get it to 20? Who knows? Keep sharing that link. Message your friends, get them to jump over to the YouTube channel, join the discussion. Always great to have more people in. We've got some more questions to get to. Before I get to them, if you didn't see at the beginning of the chat, you might want to scroll back up and have a look. But not that you have to by any means. Absolutely, it's not a necessity. But down at the bottom of the chat, you'll notice there is a $ button. If you click on that one, if you really want to, that's going to allow you to do what's called a super chat. You can make a small donation to the channel. By no means, like I said, should you feel like you have to, but if you are getting plenty out of the videos I've been putting up and you want to support the channel in more ways than just jumping on and saying hello or commenting or sharing the videos, if you did want to make a small contribution, it would be much appreciated. It helps me keep everything running in terms of equipment, camera stuff, all the live stream software that I've got. If you did want to jump on and do that, I would really appreciate it. Again, no sort of pressure to do anything. I just appreciate you guys sharing the content and enjoying the discussions that we have. But like I said, it is there if anyone does want to jump on it and help the channel out and support what we are doing here in terms of building a community. Getting into some of our new questions here. Coming back to that caffeine topic we were talking about before, I've read also you shouldn't take in sugar at the same time as caffeine since the sugar inhibits the effect of caffeine. I haven't read too much into that. That's an interesting insight if there is a bit of research there. If you do have a paper or any research that is showing some of that, I'd be interested to see it. So if you want to send that through to me on Instagram or send me a message, send me an email, however you want to get in contact with some of the research you found on that. I haven't actually seen too much on it. So be keen to sort of see how much it does. I think when we are talking about the inhibition, like I said before, the main one for a lot of people is the fact that they're chronically, I guess, or already used up their ability to have caffeine to have an effect, if that makes sense. Like you're having way too much caffeine throughout the week, or you're having a significant amount of caffeine through the week, so then it takes more to then provide an effect, more than what you were having. So if you're having 2 coffees a day every day for 6 months, you get into your race, you basically then would have to have the equivalent of 2 coffees plus more to be able to get that caffeine effect. So I think that's probably the major inhibition part. But in terms of the sugar side of things, I'd be interested to see if there is a blunting effect, because that is obviously going to change maybe how we sort of prescribe and look at caffeine. So if you can send any further information through, always happy to have a read and have a learn of what you found and what you've got. As much as I can answer the majority of the questions, happy to have you guys jump in and join the discussion and provide some insight too, because that's how we're all going to sort of learn as well. I don't know everything and I don't claim to know everything. Hope to know a reasonable amount about endurance and performance, but there's obviously some things I'm not as across as others. So yeah, happy to learn off that. So if you want to send it through, if you've got something, would appreciate it. Coming back to talking about the marathon swim going on this weekend in the pool. Okay, so you can't bring any real food on the day. It's a charity. You want to go sub 2 hours 30. Still a lot of swimming though. So you want to be getting, if you can't take any fueling with you, I'm assuming you're going to be allowed hydration. So maybe it's the type of thing that sports drinks are going to be your friend to be able to get those carbs back in. But yeah, loading up as best you can on those low GI carbs. But then keep in mind, when I say 2.5 hours is a long time in a pool, but in the grand scheme of things, compared to like an Ironman where you're out there for 10 hours, it is a lot less. So keep that in mind in terms of how much fuel you are getting in terms of pre-event as a loading sort of strategy. And I also really appreciate, thanks for leaving a comment here. I'm going to get it up, give you a bit of a shout out again, because you've been asking some great questions tonight, but appreciate the support from everyone on the channel. Had some really great feedback come through via email, posted on my Instagram today. So if you go check out my Instagram story at NJ_sportscience, be able to check out a great email we had come through, very similar to the awesome feedback that we've just got here about the best fitness sports science channel on YouTube. Let's hope we can continue that, and hopefully I can continue bringing you some great content. You've been enjoying the content so far, so really good to hear the nice feedback. And that's why I do all this content, do the live streams and make the videos for you guys, is because I want to try and help you out and provide some insight into how you can improve your performance, or if you're a coach yourself, improve your athlete's performance. That's really what we're here to do. And it's good to hear that people are getting some good things out of the streams and out of the videos and all the content that I've been putting out recently. Alan, great to see you here in the chat as well. Yes, replay will be up in full, but then I'll also probably go through. We've had some great questions tonight, so I might go through and create one of those summary videos again and post that either tomorrow or Friday, as usual, to give you the best bits. Take out some of my ums and ahs that I've just been hearing myself say for the last 3 or 5 seconds. But I'll put the full replay will be up immediately after we finish up here tonight, so you'll be able to go back and just skip through to the best bits you'll be able to find them. But I will put up a highlights package video of the best things, because I know a lot of people around the world can't necessarily get to this time zone. Had some people contact me previously that you're in Europe or the USA. They can't get to a 7 p.m. Wednesday night Melbourne time. So I will put up the replays for you and the highlights package if we need to. Really good to see still 12 of us in here. I think this has probably been the most consistent viewing we've had. Sometimes we have a bit of up and down of people coming in and out throughout the stream, but we've pretty much had 12, I think, for the last sort of 15, 20 minutes or so, which has been awesome. And we've been on for about 50 minutes. So I don't want to take up too much of particularly the people who've jumped in from the beginning. Really appreciate you jumping on. Right back to Josh. If you're still in here, really appreciate you being one of the first ones to kick things off tonight and coming right through over the last 50 minutes or so. If you do have any other questions, feel free to chuck them in the chat. I'm happy to answer a couple more before we do finish up. If there isn't anything though, we might wrap it up, because I know we've been on for a little while here. But yeah, keep those questions coming through. Keep sharing it. We do still have a bit of time. I don't necessarily have anywhere to go in a rush or anything like that. So if we keep this going for longer than the next 10 or so minutes, absolutely happy to keep answering your questions as long as they keep coming through. Got another one here from Michael again. I like to do 1 caffeine-free day a week, usually on a rest day or easy day, then caffeine-free-ish for the taper, and that feels pretty perfect for me. Yeah, good strategy, I think, there. And that's something similar to what I try to do is, particularly on your rest day, you probably don't feel like you need that caffeine compared to normal, because you're not doing the same amount of activity. It makes sense. And as long as you're getting that good quality sleep and nutrition, hydration sorted, you're going to be pretty good when it comes to having that effect of when caffeine needs to do its job and when it needs to kick in. Caffeine-free day is quite good. I tend to try to keep it reasonably, when I say random, if I feel like I want a coffee or need a coffee, then I'll have one. And then sometimes when I feel like I'm catching myself in a bit of over routine with, I'm just kind of getting up and making a coffee for the sake of making a coffee. Did that today actually, where I was like, I'm making a second coffee, but do I actually really need it? Probably not. Could I just go and have a nap in the afternoon, or should I have had some better sleep? Potentially. Could I go and do something else? Could I go and do maybe some walking outside to get me energized again? There's so many things that you can do to maybe stay away from having that caffeine. So when you need it, it's going to have its best effect. And a lot of these things are really sort of useful, if you like, in making sure it's going to count on race day. Got another couple of great questions. Jeremy, I'll get to yours now, because I know we've talked a lot about nutrition. So a good sort of, I guess, divergence into a different topic tonight. Would you recommend VO2 testing for recreational runners? Perfect timing, actually, because here in Melbourne, we've had a great announcement over the last couple of days that our lab, Mets Performance, where I work, we are fortunate enough to be able to open on the 9th of November. So any Melbourne-based athletes here, or if any of you know any Melbourne-based athletes who'd be interested in VO2 max testing, blood lactate analysis, we are opening up in a couple of weeks' time, 9th of November. All the details are at Mets Performance on Instagram, Facebook. You can head over to metsperformance.com and find all the booking information to lock in. We've got a couple of weeks open in our calendar already. We're starting to see the bookings flood in, so it's really exciting to be able to open that up. Would I recommend VO2 testing for recreational runners? Absolutely. And I'll bring the question back up because I've just sort of ran with there for the highlights video. Would recreational runners benefit from VO2 testing? Majority of the clientele that I work with when we are doing testing in the lab are what we call recreational or amateur athletes. Whether you're a top-end age group, top 5, top 10, whether you're mid-pack, whether you're just getting into the sport, you could also be a professional athlete. Anyone can benefit from VO2 testing. If anything, the lower you are on the performance scale, so if we're talking brand new beginner athlete, hope I'm doing this the right way, brand new beginner athlete all the way through to elite athlete, the people who are elite at the top end, who you commonly see getting the testing, they're just looking for 1 or 2% gains at most. The people who are at the lower end, beginners, amateur athletes, recreational runners, that type, you've typically got 5 to 10% that we can tap into by doing a test and understanding specifically what physiological aspects we need to target from a VO2 test. And this is what we go through our process at METS, but other places might offer this as well. A lot of places where you get your VO2 testing might just do the test and then just kind of give you the data and sort of that's it, nothing more. We go through it a little bit more in depth in terms of analysing training zones, providing some recommendations around types of training sessions. More than happy if you're in a different state, if you're overseas, wherever it is, if you get your VO2 testing done and you want some more advice and some recommendations, happy for you to send through your data if you're interested. Email it through to me if you want to get my email address. It's nick@metsperformance.com. Really simple. If you head over to my Instagram, you should be able to find it, or even on the About page of my YouTube here. You should be able to find it on my website, which all of which are linked down below in the description. Email me through your data. I can break it down, have a look how I would normally from the data that we collect, break down some training zones, provide some recommendations, and take you through a little bit of that process. Happy to do that. We've had plenty of athletes do that before, bring in data sets externally, particularly those who are interstate or overseas who can't come into our lab and get their testing done with us. Being able to send through your data can be really powerful. So, like I said, someone like a recreational runner has probably got more 5, 10, even 15% to gain. We've seen so many times where athletes have come in, VO2 of like 45, 50, and then 3 months later they come back, their VO2 is like 55, 60 by doing some like 2 little tweaks to their training, making a small adjustment based on what we see from the data. Whereas a professional athlete might come in and it's like, yeah, cool, your VO2 max is 75 or 80 or 85 or whatever it is, and you've got an exceptional threshold as a percentage of VO2 max and all that. Doesn't really tell me massive amounts about what I can do. Like, yeah, we can make some tweaks and we got some very specific training intensities we can use now, and great, we know exactly where you're at. And maybe off season or back end of the base phase or the race specific prep, whatever it might be. But we're still chasing 1 or 2%, whereas the average amateur athlete has probably got upwards of like 10, 12% to gain, like I said before. So definitely think it's worthwhile doing. There is always usually a cost involved, which is what a lot of people start to consider. This type of thing, we like to think at Mets, we do a reasonable job of trying to keep the cost down because we want people to be able to come in and do the testing, make it as accessible as we can to everyone. Because like everyone can benefit from doing a test. You just got to know what to do with the data afterwards, and that's what we pride ourselves on. And that's what I've always prided myself on. So if you do have some data out there you want to send through and get some more insight or a different opinion on what it actually means, happy to help and do what I can to sort of provide you a little bit more of assistance in that regard. Moving on to our next question, Robert here, great for jumping in. Thanks for the tip about not having a gel at the start of the race. It made a difference last week in a trail marathon last Saturday, I think. Awesome, good to hear. And like we said earlier in the stream, that gel immediately before the race is just going to spike that need or want for the body to take up and use carbohydrates. And for a lot of people, that's enough to help them sort of hit the wall a lot earlier than what they need to or what they are meaning to. So not having that gel immediately before the start of the race, having banana or something a little bit slower burning half an hour before, and then just getting stuck in your race is going to maximize your ability to use as much fat as possible. Obviously not going to the extreme of talking about some of the keto stuff we were talking about before and maximizing fat oxidation hugely, but we're going to maximize what we can use. Still use carbohydrates to an extent, but it's also going to help delay that burning rather than we take a gel and we just bang from the start. We're just chewing through fuel real quick because it's just a catalyst for that. Once we've already started and we're trying to play catch up in terms of refueling, that's when the gels are useful because we just need fuel now. But when we're getting into things, we want to try and delay the onset of those points as much as we can. Before taking, I don't know if you noticed, let me know in the chat as well. In your race, without taking the gel, did you find you could get further into the race before you had to have some nutrition? Interested to hear if that made a difference. I know a lot of athletes talk about a sort of experience as well. They don't have the gel before the race for the first time. They go, I actually got further in than what I would normally need to take that first gel. That's probably the clear sign that it's done its job. If you don't have to take that gel as early, then we delay when the next one happens. We delay the next one that happens. So you might actually find you didn't have to take as many gels across the entire race in some circumstances, or as much nutrition across the entire race, which can also significantly drop things like gastrointestinal upset and all those negatives associated with trying to take in fuel. So yeah, happy to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the chat Robert, if you did find that it really positively impacted the strategy throughout. If it didn't change anything, that's okay. But if you felt like it did make an impact in terms of not starting that glycogen burning too early, that's perfect. Really glad that little tip could help, and I know it has helped a lot of athletes in the past as well. Great questions that have just come through there. Again, keep the last couple coming in. But before we do finish up tonight, I've just noticed we're at 15. Again, 18. It's gone through the roof. I think Caleb sharing onto his Facebook page must be doing wonders, and all of you have done a great job passing this on. So, can we get to 20? We're 3 away. It was 18 for about a second. I saw on my screen. I've got about 17 now. Can we get to 20? Oh no, it's dropping. 16. Can we get to 20 before the end of the stream? That'd be awesome if we can. Big milestone if we can tick that off. So go and hit the share button. If you're on your computer or laptop, it's just under my finger here. That'd be great if we could. Last couple of questions, and then we'll get to it. Before I do, follow up on Rob's one before. Not sure about if it really impacted the strategy or anything like that, but had more energy at the end, and that again, bonus. If you've got the extra energy at the end, you're going to be able to push yourself a little bit harder for that little last burst to get you there as quick as you can. Awesome. Let's get stuck into some of these other ones. Michael, again, great question you've got through. When is the best time to get VO2 and lactate threshold tests? Following on from our one about recreational athletes before, should I do 4 to 8 weeks regular endurance training first, or is it good to do before starting a training program? I'm assuming I'm quite untrained at the moment. This is the golden question. I'm going to leave it up on the screen here for a little bit for anyone who's watching on the replay later. This is the golden question that I get asked day in, day out from a working capacity. When should I get tested? Is now a good time to get tested? The simple answer is every day in your training plan could be a good opportunity to do a test. It doesn't really matter. What the process and purpose of doing a test is for is to identify where your baseline is now so that we can go away, train it and improve, and then measure at some point later. I typically recommend for most athletes doing VO2 max and lactate threshold, blood lactate, all of the testing stuff. Every 3 to 4 months is probably going to be a good timeline to be working off. Every 3 to 4 months to check in on how things are going is really, really good as a starting point. If you feel like you want a couple of weeks preparation to just get back into a routine, that's okay. If you just want to know where you're at, jump in and get one done as soon as possible. Don't delay it, because it's gonna, as much as it might be a bit of a hit you a little bit brutally at how much you might have lost if you feel like you're a bit untrained, or how low of a base you're starting from. It's going to tell you exactly where you're at, and that's the fastest way to get back to where you need to be. If you know that baseline, you can then know exactly how you need to train to be able to get back to where you want to get back to, or at least start working towards that a lot quicker. The longer you delay it, almost the worse it gets, because you're just continuing to make your training much more of the unknown. You're continually just going, am I on the right path? Am I getting better? Yes or no? So best time to get tested. Every 3 to 4 months is a good strategy long term, just as a regular. I'd probably say as well, do it at the transitions of your phases. So you do it at the start of a base phase, do it at the beginning of your race specific prep, then maybe do it after you raced, like give yourself a bit of recovery after your key event, do it again there before you get back into the next base. That's usually a good timeline to follow, because then every time we move into a new phase of training, we're changing the focus. We've got clear idea of what our intensity should be. So in a base phase, we're working on VO2. So I know, all right, what are my intensities for my high intensity sessions, and what are my interval sessions, and what are my intensities for my long slow zone 2 sessions. When we do our test again before we get into the race specific, all right, what do my threshold sessions look like? What does my FTP look like? What does maybe some tempo type sessions look like? What is actually race specific there? Can go away, work on that, train, and then build again. Post-race, have a bit of recovery. All right, where are we at now? Did we improve total across that whole training plan? And now where do we reset to get back into the new base phase? Because things have probably lifted up. That's probably when is the best time. I've just seen your comment there, might get the VO2 test done now so I can brag about how much it improves. Absolutely. I mean, like, if that's something that's going to help motivate you too, like you're coming in a low base, you come in and for whatever reason, your VO2 max is 50 or 45 or whatever it is, relative, you come back in 3 months' time or even 8 weeks' time, and because you've gone away and just trained and you started a really crazy low base for your normal, if you want to call it that, you've gone away, trained, and you come back in 8 to 12 weeks later and you're up at 60 relative where you should be because you've rebounded really quick and you've trained smart, then you just brag about you went up, 20% in in sort of a really short period of time. You've dramatically increased what your numbers are. So yeah, why not brag about it? Be proud of your achievements and your efforts. Is definitely something to work towards. Moving into our next question here, Alan. Great question. Jumping in again. Appreciate you jumping in on the live streams and asking us questions. Quick question on long runs. Is there a length of time run that the body benefits more? Example, 2-hour run is more beneficial than a 1 hour or 2 1 hour. Yeah, good one. Really, when it comes to long, slow running, the key component of it is it has to be a minimum of 20 minutes. So when we are doing anything aerobic in nature, trying to develop aerobic capacity, first and foremost, it has to be a minimum of 20 minutes. So I know that's not probably where we're heading initially with the question, but that's really the benchmark. When it comes to how much do we need to do after that, beyond the 20 minutes, obviously if you're training for a marathon, a single run of 20 minutes is probably going to be bugger all for your training. It's definitely going to be under preparing. If we're training for like a half marathon though, and we're starting to get up into some of these long runs, maybe a 2-hour run, is it better to go and do 1 2-hour run on the weekends, high intensity throughout the week? Is it better to do 2 1-hour runs in the week? I always typically, for the most part, look at how can we get the athlete to spend time on legs to about 110% of your estimated race time or estimated split time. Why I say split time is because triathletes, obviously, split time is going to be different to event time. I don't want you going out there and trying to practice a 10-hour Ironman long, slow effort. Go out and do, if you're planning for a 3-hour marathon, if you're a marathon runner or you're planning for 5 hours on the bike in an Ironman, you want to be building up to just over that in terms of amount of time in that session. That gives you the aerobic capacity and just that mental ability, but also the muscular endurance to work for that period of time. So I'd probably prefer somewhere in your program, if you're building up to a half marathon, for example, Alan, just as an example here, if you're building up to a half marathon, you're aiming to do 90 minutes, you're aiming to do an hour 40, whatever you are. Building up to something like a single 2-hour run is probably going to be quite effective. Yeah, it's probably a bit longer than what you absolutely minimum need to do, but doing that is going to be effective because it's going to teach you to just run for 2 hours at lower intensity. You go and do your race-specific prep, you come in, and running 90 minutes is a lot, even though it's at a higher intensity, it's a lot easier than what running 2 hours was from a mental perspective anyway. So you've got the muscular endurance to be able to go for 2 hours if you really need to, but you only have to run for 90 minutes, if that's what makes sense. Whereas 2 1-hour runs never really prepare you. Yes, it's the amount of training load in the week, but they never really prepare you for that one. So I always like to have at least one big session where we are building up ideally to 110% of your estimated event time. Again, not always practical. Ironman athlete, you're probably not going to go out and do a 4-hour run after you've done a 6-hour bike on the Saturday or a 5.5-hour bike on the Saturday. That's where we can get a bit more creative. Do like 2 hours in the morning and then 1 hour in the afternoon or 45 minutes in the afternoon. That split run is perfect because Ironman, you start at 6 a.m. The last thing you want to do at 5 p.m. in your training day is be running. So go out on a Sunday afternoon when you're fatigued and tired. That's what you're going to be facing on race day. So it is specific. I like that. And you're already getting enough muscular endurance that it's just about putting one foot in front of the other at that point in the race. So it's not, I'm not overly concerned. But some of the shorter distances like marathon, and particularly the faster you get at marathon, half marathon in particular, 70.3, they're much easier to get those 110% of estimated race time or estimated split time in your long, slow run is that ideal to build up to. Just gives you enough endurance in the legs, really simply. So hopefully that answers that one. Let me know in the chat if there's anything you want me to add on to that. Having more and more questions come through. Great to see some new names in the chat as well. Really appreciate you guys jumping on. This one's before bragging about VO2, Michael. Absolutely brag about that VO2. If you get a big change by coming in a little bit underdone, definitely going to see some big change if you get the right advice on the back end of it and be able to implement that into your training. Jump into our next question from Mad Max here. Apologies if I'm getting anyone by their username. That's all I can see on my end, and I've had some funny run-ins with people's usernames and it's not their actual name or whatever. So apologies if it's something that your YouTube account you created years ago and it's just stuck with you. I'm just going to refer to you as that until you let me know. And apologies if I forget if you've already told me who you are. I'm just going to go with usernames because it's the first thing I see on my screen. But from Mad Max here, I'm 110 kilos and 196 centimeters trained running for 3 months. And my VO2 max didn't change a bit. What could it be? I followed Garmin's half marathon plan. follow up to this, by the way, my times did go down quite a bit. So looks like from a performance output, your times have improved, but not necessarily VO2 max. What I'm going to suggest is the case here is probably Garmin's half marathon plan had a lot of threshold and tempo running. I'm just guessing. I haven't seen what their most recent one is, but let me know if I'm sort of bang on the mark there. What they've probably done is, because you're coming from relatively sort of, if you're coming from a low base, for example, and you haven't done much, you do 3 months of sort of very specific training. We increase the percentage of our VO2 max we can hold. So you're not actually changing the size of the engine. You're inserting the cylinders. And that's going to lead to improvement in performance. Absolutely. If you're a V6 engine running on 4 cylinders, you go to way to do threshold, tempo, race specific, which is typically what these Garmin type plans are going to do for the most part, and target that part of your physiology. It'll boost you up to a V6 running on 6 cylinders. So of course you're going to be able to go faster in some of those efforts. VO2 max isn't going to change though. That's the kicker. If you were to go away and do some really high intensity stuff, easy way to do it, field test. We spoke about VO2 max testing before. That would be your ideal. If you're in Melbourne, come and see me at Mets. Happy to help you out. If you're not, go away and do something like a 2K time trial. Is a really good one. Go as hard as fast as you can for 2K. Take your average pace over that distance, and that's going to be your VO2 max pace, pretty close to, right? That's a good one to then test if VO2 max is changing, is if you get faster in that 2K time trial. That's a really simple one. If you get faster, VO2 max is likely changed, because to be able to move it up, you either have to significantly improve your economy, which for the most part is going to be accompanied for most amateur athletes or average athletes, if I put it that way, in the nicest way possible. That's where you're going to have an increase in oxygen consumption as well, rather than just running economy. So really easy to see that VO2 max is probably going to change. If you are looking at VO2 max as well as part of your watch, I mean, I've personally gotten a hell of a lot fitter over the last sort of 6 weeks just from my own training program, and I've gone from 57 to 58 on my Garmin. That's just kind of the way it is with the algorithm. Sometimes it's a little bit broken and it doesn't really do what we want it to do. But always the type of thing that it probably is more that you've improved your percentage of VO2 max and your threshold in relation to where your engine is, rather than changing the engine size. You've gone from V6 running on 4 cylinders to a V6 running on 6, instead of upgrading to a V8 and then being able to improve from there. Because yes, that is still going to improve your race times and improve all of your times across the board. Moving that top end is just a shift in the training model. And that's why I say Garmin typically, and those types of online plans, are typically going to follow things like threshold and tempo, because that's quite sort of traditional running programming. Go away, do a 2K time trial, work at that average pace. That's your VO2 max. Take 95% of that, so convert it into a kilometers per hour or miles per hour, whatever you use. Take 95% of that, 2 to 4 minutes on, equal walking recovery, 12 to 20 minutes of working time. So 12 minutes of working time is like 6 by 2 minute efforts, for example. Go and do sessions like that for about 6 to 8 weeks, and you'll probably notice VO2 starts to change a bit. You'll see a bit of change in that 2K time trial. That's the kicker. See a change in the 2K time trial, VO2 has probably gone up. And I've just seen great advice. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question there and gives you some practical takeaways for what you can do in that space. Moving to the next one, we are smashing through this. I'm absolutely loving how many people are in here. We're 18. Let's try to get to 20. I know it ticked over for a very small period of time, or at least I think I saw it tick over to 20 people in here. Let's try and get as many people in. If you haven't shared, make sure you share it. Quickly message someone. We're not going to be on for too much longer, but we do have some questions to cover. So if anyone knows someone that might be keen to jump in and join the conversation, definitely let them know. All right, moving on to Chippy Brown here, who I've just seen in the chat. Zach, I believe this is. Pools are open. What is the best way to use 45 to 50 minutes? Great question. But to begin with pools being open, particularly for our Melbourne-based athletes, we've just had pools reopen recently. Some of the other states are a little bit different. You've probably had pools for a little while, and internationally it might be a different scenario. We've only got 45 or 50 minutes in the water, so you have to make the most of it. I would be saying it's all about, first and foremost, just getting a feel for the water again. So if you're going in, let's say 2 swims a week, one of those swims you want to be a bit more technique focused and just try to turn the arms over and get some muscular endurance back in the upper body. So just swim continuously, or swim longer. When I say longer intervals, 300s, 400s with a short rest. Don't have to be pushing yourself super hard. We just want to build some general aerobic ability back in. We also just want to build that muscular endurance and that upper body side of things as well. Your other swim, high intensity. Get the speed back into your stroke is going to be critical, and the technical side of things also. Don't just smash your arms around. Technical side of things is key too. So I'd be doing things like 50 meters as flat out as you can. Maybe turn around on depending on how fast you're doing 50 meters, turn around on the minute or the 90 seconds. 100 meters with a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio is good. 50 meters with a 1-to-1 work to rest. So if it takes you 45 seconds to swim 50 meters, take 45 seconds rest. Then do like 10 of them. You should be able to turn that around pretty well, or start with like 8 or even 6. Keep it quality though. If you start to drop off in the quality, so let's say 100 meters wise, and this is something, a session I've picked up from Tyler, one of the guys I work with at Met, who's a gun swimmer. A set that he does when he's trying to get back into the routine of things is he'll do like 6 100s, right? And he'll work off, all right, I want to hit a particular pace. He swims crazy fast, so I'll twist it into terms that most of us can probably understand and comprehend in terms of pace. He swims down at like 115 per 100 pretty comfortably. I can get down, when I'm reasonably fit, I can get down to like 90 seconds, which I know is for 90 seconds per 100, which is for most people something reasonable, 145 thereabouts. We're all slightly different, but you get the idea. Let's say you do 90 seconds per 100, and after that you're giving yourself let's say 45 seconds rest or 30 seconds rest as an example. So we've got like a 3-to-1 work to rest ratio. It's really good for building aerobic endurance. Perfect. Try to get the high the intensity up there. So work pretty hard, work pretty hard intensity. But if you're aiming to do 6 of those and you get through the 5th one, but on the 5th one you actually drop down and your intensity drops, you couldn't hit 90 seconds, you're actually a lot slower and significantly slower. Like if you're 92 seconds, I'm not too fast. If you're like 110 seconds on that 5th one, stop the session there. Don't do the 6th. Quality is better than quantity in this regard to get the speed back. Next session, try to go for the 6. You might find you can get there. If you can get there, all right, next session we'll aim for 8. But again, if we aim for 8 and you can't get past the 6th one without having a big drop off, just cut it at 6. You're better off than finishing the set there than trying to push through at a slower pace and just fatigue yourself for the sake of it. So they're really some key things. Have a really quality, higher intensity, shorter, sharper session, and have a bit more of an endurance focused session, and you're going to give yourself good balance in the week from a returning to swimming perspective. Because I know that's what most of us are doing. We're returning to swim rather than trying to perform at the moment from a swimming perspective. I've got Caleb here, who's jumped back in. Yes, with indoor pools in Metro Melbourne aren't open. I believe they're opening soon though. I don't know the exact date, but you've got there November 8th. I think it might be November 8th. Actually, I think it might be November 9th, the Monday, because the 8th is a Sunday, so everything's always like the 24 hours after. And we're opening on the 9th as well, so I think that would probably make sense, indoor spaces. But outdoor pools are still open. I've got the bay at the end of my street, Port Phillip. Probably still a bit cold at the moment, but nice days, it's probably useful. So if you can get out in the open water, brave it a little bit, but no restrictions on that in Melbourne. Hopefully other people have got some more liberties or freedoms to be able to do their sessions at the moment. But yeah, quality over quantity is the perfect way to go about it. Moving through, what else have we got here? I'm trying to keep track of all these questions. It'd be great to have them all coming through. I might keep these ones the last couple because we've been on here almost for 90 minutes now, which is by far the longest. And to have so many of you still in here after this period of time, that's awesome. Coming back to Alan's point, 3:30 marathon target, so I need to get long run 110% of the 3:30. Yeah, there and thereabouts. I mean, do it within reason. I mean, if you're going and doing a 4-hour run, like that is a lot. So just be mindful of how that fits in the week. But maybe it's a case of a 3 hours 40, 3 hours 45 is the longest. But only you need to do that once or twice in the program. You don't need to do it every week. That's for sure. I'm going to keep this on the last one here, and then we're going to wrap things up. Last one here for tonight. Thanks for joining us on the stream. We're coming back from a running injury and using cross-training to keep training volume higher. Should cross-training sessions be long, slow, and running high intensity, or the opposite? Depends what the injury is. Without going too much into a specific scenario of an injury, you got to be mindful of, we want to try and rehabilitate first so that we're strong enough and able to perform any sort of training. So you want to build back the load slowly. Building in your high intensity progressively is also really critical. I would be almost inclined to think about some of that cross training maybe at a higher intensity rather than just the long slow, purely from the fact that, like, if you've got an Achilles injury or a calf injury and you can still ride, but you can't run as much, keeping the high intensity is going to maintain as much aerobic fitness as you can, so that when you get back to running, your pace might have dropped because you'll lose a bit of economy and you have to build back the tolerance and etc. and the load tolerance and alike, and the chronic loading in terms of that space. But it's more like you're going to have to bring that back quite progressively anyway. Whereas if you can maintain as much of your general aerobic fitness by doing some high intensity on a bike, cross trainer, rower, whatever, that would probably be a really good way to go about it, because you're still able to do that high intensity work. If you drop the high intensity completely and you did long, slow, and some of your bigger volume on a cross training method through cross training, and you just did some short, sharp bursts, you're probably going to lose a lot of your fitness at the top end, because you're not doing enough from a running perspective. Then keep it going. Does that sort of make sense in terms of where I'm going here, guys? With if we're coming back from an injury, or coming back from anything, detraining, if you don't train for a period, easiest way to lose fitness is to cut out your high intensity. If you're going into a maintenance phase where you go, I don't want to train properly and I just want to maintain as much as I can, maybe inevitably going to lose a little bit, but as much as I can, 2 to 3 sessions in the week. And really, if you're getting up there and pushing that high intensity, do the 1-to-1 work to rest I mentioned before. 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 6 times, at a 9.5 out of 10, go as hard as you can. That's going to be 2 of those a week is going to be enough to maintain as much of the top end of your engine as possible, really. It's a really simple way to do it. So if you can transition some of that to your cross-training sessions, but then also use the cross-training to help keep a bit of volume in your legs. If you're then coming back into the running side of things and it's a running-based injury, the volume's going to have to be very progressive anyway. So I'd rather you work on that top end so you can then seamlessly move back into the high-intensity running, because the aerobic fitness is still there and you're not then, I guess, losing out in 2 paths. Volume's going to go down because muscular endurance for a cross-training activity like cycling is going to be very different to the muscular endurance required to tolerate running. So keep that in mind. I'd be more inclined to go some sort of high intensity on a bike, for example. Do a little bit of long, slow from a cross-training perspective, but you don't want to do massive amounts because it's not specific to running. And then just work on bringing the running back progressively. Your high intensity in the running slowly progresses as like short bursts. You might do 15 seconds on, 15 seconds walk 6 times, and that's how you have to start. You have to start really, really small. Then we can build back up to those 2-minute efforts again. But if you're able to still ride, you jump on a stationary bike and you can do 2 on, 2 off, 9.5 out of 10, and then a very, very easy spinning recovery, you're going to maintain that top end of your engine, or in a general capacity or a general sense, as best you can, or at least minimize the damage in terms of any detraining that's going to occur from you not being able to train fully. So that's how I would think about it. Again, very injury dependent, because there's a lot of factors of how you injured, how bad was the injury, where the injury was. Those types of things can be sort of difficult to work through, and there's some ins and outs that we need to go through and some hoops to jump through with specific types of injury. But as a general principle, you want to try and maintain as much of that high intensity as you can. So if you do happen to be able to do some high intensity on the bike, that's going to be the best way to do, or through cross training methods, that's going to be the best way to maintain as much of your engine as you can, minimize the detraining, and then just be very progressive when you get back into your running again. Hopefully that's answered all of the questions tonight. I really appreciate your jumping on. I'm going to leave it there because we have been on, just seeing it tick over 83 minutes now, 84 minutes. Again, awesome to have so many of you in and for so long tonight. Smashed all kinds of little channel records we had with how many people in the live stream at its peak, how many people average across the live stream. I mean, before tonight, we've got 13 watching now, and I think it's been sitting on about 12 or 13 for the better part of the last hour. Before tonight, the highest we had was 12 people at one time, and I think it lasted for about 5 minutes, and then we're back down to sort of 6 or 7. So unbelievable how this community is growing. I really do appreciate it. Keep sharing the videos, keep sharing the channel with people you think might be interested. If you haven't subscribed and you joined us tonight and you enjoyed the Q&A, make sure you do hit the subscribe button down below, turn the bell on to make sure you're notified of when we do go live. Wednesday, 7 p.m. Melbourne time is the time each week we are going to be jumping on. As I guess a guarantee. Keep an eye out for the videos that do come up. If you have any suggestions as well, let me know some suggestions of videos. Leave them in the comment section. Email me, get in contact via Instagram is a really good way to get in touch as well, at NJ_sportscience, to ask you questions. I'll leave those tags up in a moment at the end so you can get all across those. But keep the questions coming through, keep the video suggestions coming through. Let's keep this community building. I actually saw the other day a great sort of question or a great comment came through, and I was sort of really appreciative of it. It was, as we stand at the moment, just looking at the subscription numbers, we're at 2,370 odd subscribers on the channel. And someone actually commented saying, I can't believe you're under 2.5 thousand or 2,500 subscribers. And for the quality of the content that's coming out. And I was very appreciative of the comment there. And like I said, I do all of this for people like yourselves who've jumped in tonight and asked you questions and joined the discussion. So the more people we can bring into these streams, into the videos, into the comment section, get the discussions going, the better it's going to be for everyone. The more things we can do on the channel, the more creative we can get with some of these live streams and more interactive. Hopefully at some point I can work out a way to bring some of you in and bring into the conversation and we can talk on these. All of those things I'm looking forward to doing as the community grows. So thanks again for everyone jumping in. Appreciate all of your comments and questions. Keep sharing the channel. I'm going to leave it there because I've rambled a little bit at the end here, but I'll chuck all my socials up in a second so you can go check those out and pass them on to anyone you think might be interested as well. Really, really appreciate it tonight. Everyone who jumped in, asked a question. As always, look forward to seeing you in the next live stream or in the comment section on Instagram, wherever it might be. That is it for tonight. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.